Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I'm so happy to be here. And do you know why I'm so happy to be here, Tony?
I don't, because I'm not.
Well, Tony, it's because I've been trying to reach you about your car's extended warranty.
Oh, no. I was thinking about that the other day. I was going to set up something like 3 or 4 years down the road for some random thing. And it's like, enough people understand that? Am I the only person who gets these calls, or do other people? And I know other people do. But yeah, I saw a video probably on TikTok where a husband went in for a colonoscopy. And his wife was in the room with them, and so he goes under. She slips a note between his butt crack that says, "We've been trying to reach you about your car's extended warranty." So when the doctor goes in there, they pull the note out, and it's like, no. See, it's funny, isn't it?
That is funny.
You didn't know where it was going.
Colonoscopy can go a lot of different directions, but
actually, can only go one.
Well, that's in a less literal way, can go a lot of different directions. In a literal way, yes, only one.
Tom, do you want to start the show over, or should we just keep going? I think we should just keep going.
I think we just power through. We're going to do another listener question show. You guys sent us a trillion questions, so we are powering our way through those. We'll do this one, and then there's another one that I think we may do as a whole separate show because it's a much more involved conversation. But this one, we'll start this one from @Isaac McIntyre. What do you think Julian Fleming's potential is, and why isn't he talked about as a big part of the Buckeyes receiver group?
Tom, I think he isn't talked about as much because he's now been here for 2 years and he's not as shiny as Emeka Egbuka. And he hasn't produced like Marvin Harrison. Frankly, he hasn't produced like Emeka Egbuka either. And he's been given some opportunities. And I was looking at his numbers. So over his 2 years, 19 catches for 160 yards, 8.4 yards a catch. In 2021, this past year, 12 catches, 86 yards. That's not all that exciting. And you compare that to what Marvin Harrison did just in the Rose Bowl. But even if you compare it to Emeka Egbuka as a true freshman this past year, went, I think 9 for 190. Just, so he has half the catches of Julian Fleming in half the time, but also, more yardage. And so I think there's this, let's see what else we got. Let's get some of these guys that have not had that opportunity. And it's really hard to look at Emeka Egbuka and think you should be on the bench. And it's impossible to look at Marvin Harrison and say you should be on the bench. But I will also say, I'm sure people a year or two ago were saying Jameson Williams should be on the bench and Julian Fleming should be on the field. And where he was the shiny thing at that point, and Jameson Williams had no luster. So there is precedent for just, hey, be patient and guys will emerge. I mean, he's just coming into his junior year. He's dealt with injuries, but he continues to deal with injuries. And it's his junior, he's heading into his junior year. So through 2 years, he's missed time and has had issues. Now it's kind of been the same shoulder issue. Then I think they've got that cleaned up. I think there's tons of potential there. Obviously, I think he's still, he came to Ohio State raw. I understand completely the idea that you need to have Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka on the field as much as possible, but also you can't just do it with 3 guys either. So Brian Hartline's going to have to figure some things out. But I get the feeling. I get why people are maybe forgetting about him, but I also don't know that I think he can still provide quite a bit next year.
Yeah, I mean, your point about the shininess is, I think, maybe the most direct answer to this question of why isn't he talked about as a big part of the Buckeyes receiver group? Because the answer there is, well, that sort of depends on who you're talking to. If you're talking to Brian Hartline about the Buckeyes receiver group, he is talked about as a big part of that receiver group. And Brian Hartline very much wants to make sure Julian Fleming is a part of this team and a part of this receiver group moving forward. Because you listen to Hartline talk, and Hartline will talk about the fact that he will just every once in a while just make these plays in practice that are like, that is not a play that a human being should be able to make. So Hartline wants him there. Hartline is also the one who sees him the most. Fans a couple of years in, if you haven't done anything, it's kind of like, all right, what's next? Because obviously this is not going to work. As someone who titles videos on YouTube, let me tell you, JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer and Travion Henderson and guys like that last summer, those were the videos everyone wants to click on, because it's like, oh well, this new guy has no flaws, and this new guy is going to be perfect immediately, and he's going to be amazing, and he's like a superhero, and it's incredible. And like the guys who are, now, well, okay, now we've seen these guys, and like, okay, they're still exciting, but they're not quite like, oh man, look at these guys who are coming in now. Look at these guys who are coming in next. Those guys are amazing. Like CJ Hicks, like Sonny Styles. Like, oh man, I want to see more about those guys, because I can't believe how amazing they're going to be. Like, you have to be a little bit patient sometimes. Not everything is going to happen immediately. No one is going to be absolutely perfect. Look at Paris Campbell. If you had written off Paris Campbell's career after 2 years, Paris Campbell had fewer catches and fewer yards than Julian Fleming did after 2 years. And then Paris Campbell ended up putting up a 90 catch season or something like that. And, setting all sorts of Ohio State records. Like, sometimes, especially when you're in a deep unit, you're going to end up sitting behind guys for a little while. And you've sort of seen flashes from Fleming. I mean, he had that one catch against Nebraska that was just a crazy catch. They ended up ruling incomplete, but it was like, watching it looked like it was a catch probably. And it was just one of those like, well, the ball moved slightly in his hands, but just to be in the position to make that play, it's just like you're starting to see what Brian Hartline's talking about. So, I think the question of why Fleming isn't talked about as a big part of the Buckeyes receivers group may be more about who's doing the talking at any given time than it is about Fleming himself.
You said Paris Campbell. Let's also throw in Terry McLaurin, who didn't have a catch until his third year on campus. And even then, as a redshirt sophomore, only had 11 catches for 114 yards. And I believe Paris Campbell didn't have his first catch until his third year on campus as well, because he started a few games as a redshirt freshman. And of course, we remember the drop against Virginia Tech in that opener. Didn't have a catch after that. Didn't have a catch before that either. So I think both of those guys are good examples of that, and just the patience that is needed. Now, they were both humble 4-star, top 300 type players, and not the number one receiver in the nation like Julian Fleming. But there are also people who tell you he should have never been the number one receiver in the nation, because he was coming from a running program and he had a lot to work on. And certainly all of the skill set is there. The abilities are there. It just takes some time to put it together. And it's also really hard to stand out when you're playing amongst a bunch of guys who are already starting and established. I mean, just ask Jameson Williams like that. What more proof and information do you need after his 2 years? Shoot, he probably had fewer catches than what Julian Fleming did in his first 2 years at Ohio State. So I think there's no reason to think that he can't be a big part of this, or that all of the potential is there. It's just there's only so many footballs, and yes, Ohio State's going to throw the ball a bunch, but you go back to last year when we were trying to figure out how many catches is Jaxon Smith-Njigba going to have. Well, he can't have more than 50, because Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave are going to have so many, and then almost doubled the numbers we probably thought he was capable of having, just because, well, there's only so many throws. But if you're good enough, they'll find him, and it's up to Julian Fleming to show that he's good enough.
And if we want to keep going down the list of examples of Ohio State wide receivers who did not have particularly big numbers after 2 years, I will refer you to the one Michael Thomas, who had one catch as a true freshman and then redshirted his second year because he was so completely not ready. Whatever happened to that guy? I don't know what. I assume selling insurance or something. And to your point about the style of offense he played in high school, that reminds me a little bit of Josh Myers, who was I think that he was either a wing T or triple option team down in Miamisburg, and came in really highly touted and just was like not even close to ready to play his first year or two, because he just was not, he had not ever had to pass block. So he had to learn that basically from scratch. And that took a little time, and everyone went, "What's wrong with Josh Myers?" And then Josh Myers was is starting lineman for Ohio State and is now playing in the NFL. And it's like, oh, it turns out nothing was wrong with Josh Myers. Sometimes it just takes a couple of years to get to the point where you're ready to contribute. And again, the health issues with Fleming, the shoulder issues with Fleming, like that is a big part of this story. If Fleming was 100% healthy, I kind of feel like we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Real quick, because the Josh Myers thing always reminds me of one of my favorite stories that I always talk about whenever he's brought up, I think, was his freshman year when he got to Ohio State and he had to do some pass rush drills against Nick Bosa. And he talked about, well, that's when I knew I wasn't going to be an offensive tackle. And, that's certainly a wake up call. And he was moved to the interior much shortly after that. And, Billy Price came to Ohio State as a defensive tackle and realized pretty quickly at that point that he probably belongs on offense. And, sometimes it just takes guys different periods of time to find their footing and then blossom.
Next one from @TLAG7863636. What do you hear about the veteran defensive end trio, Harrison, Jean-Baptiste, and Friday? Are they coming back? This is a question that was sent a little before the NFL draft deadline, so we can tell you that half with a great deal of certainty. Yes. Personally, I would like to see a shift away from them to Sawyer, JTT, Curry, Abor, and Jaxon. So again, to answer the first half of that question, yes, Harrison is coming back. Friday is coming back. Jean-Baptiste is coming back. So they will all be back. The second half of this, I think, gets into the new and shiny conversation we had before a little bit, where you haven't seen some of these guys fail. Jack Sawyer played a decent amount. JT Tuimoloau was very, very good as a true freshman. Sawyer, I think, did not quite live up to some of the expectations for him after that spring game where he had 4 sacks and like a half of play. I think the expectations maybe got a little unrealistic for him, and he didn't necessarily live up to those. And I think Ohio State's coaching staff was very happy with what they got out of him as a true freshman, but some of the maybe fan expectations outside of the building expectations, he may not have lived up to those. But as Larry Johnson said, he was kind of a finesse player. Like he just was not quite big enough yet to be ready to contribute at the college level and in like an every down kind of situation. Those guys I think are going to be better this year. We'll see where Sawyer plays out. I mean, he was the first name that a lot of people thought when you talked about the Leo position for Knowles' defense. He may fit in there. Curry, Abor, Jaxon. I mean, I think this is kind of another round of great defensive linemen for Ohio State. I am very excited to see Caden Curry. Like everyone who sees Caden Curry, Mark and Kevin, when they were down at the All-American game in San Antonio, just listed him as just like the most consistently impressive Ohio State player that was there. And there were like 10 Ohio State players there. I'm very interested to see what you get out of him. But I just, as a true freshman, you don't come in and just immediately dominate at the college level. That just is not how it works for defensive linemen. I think having a year to kind of continue to learn and grow behind some of the older guys, play situationally like Tuimoloau and Sawyer did last year. And then in 2023, when Harrison, Jean-Baptiste, Friday are off to the NFL, then then those guys can kind of take on a larger role in what will 2023 be probably Tuimoloau and Sawyer's final year at Ohio State. And then those guys are ready for that next year. It's kind of a progression, and you can't rush things.
Here's something that happened to me that I was not expecting. So I mentioned this on the morning scoop that I was on Alex's Around the Oval, and we were doing the projections of every single starter for the Notre Dame game. Like who will end up starting for the in a Notre Dame game. And when I got to the defensive end situation and the Leo spot, for me, I guess I don't know enough about what Jim Knowles wants to do there. I don't see Zach Harrison necessarily as the Leo. He very, very well could be. So I had him starting at the other defensive end spot, but I see him and JT Tuimoloau playing a lot. And I could see JT Tuimoloau starting there if Zach Harrison is at Leo. However, when I don't consider Zach Harrison as the Leo, and then it comes down to, well, who is it? And you immediately go to Jack Sawyer. However, I ended up going with the 5th-year guy, Javonte Jean-Baptiste, because he's the 5th-year guy, and we don't talk much about him, but he's always around. And like, there's this Larry Johnson has some loyalty, to these guys, and he is very much that tweener type. But then you look at the production, and they basically, Sawyer and Javonte Jean-Baptiste basically put up the same kind of numbers. And Javonte Jean-Baptiste had about 140 more snaps based on our buddy Dan Hope's snap counts over at 11 Warriors. So they're producing about the same, but JJB is getting almost twice the snaps. Now, freshman Jack Sawyer is getting the snaps that are advantageous quite a bit. That's what Larry Johnson wants to do, put him in some safe spots. But it just seems like, yes, Jack Sawyer makes the most sense. However, when you're trying to predict what a coach will do, I went with the veteran there because that's a lot of times what coaches do.
And, I think that is the sort of safe default position, is that the veteran will get at least get the benefit of the doubt ahead of the younger guy.
Game one.
Game one. Yes. And then I think we saw that with the running back situation this year. You saw, Travion Henderson did not start the opener, did he? Or he only had what?
Hardly played.
Yeah. He only had like 3 carries, something like that in the opener. That was sort of what we told you to expect. Like, don't expect him to start day one. Expect him to start in October. And he might have even taken over. I think he was in there even earlier than that. But that's, starting as a true freshman day one. I think Denzel Burke was the only one who did that last year. And that was really an anomaly. And that was a little bit based on, him being kind of a little bit of an outlier athletically and in terms of development and all that, but also injuries and unavailability of some of the guys who are maybe ahead of him on that depth chart. So yeah, that is I think it just go into the year assuming the default answer is that the older guy will start, and then the younger guy has an opportunity to pass him and maybe win the job later in the season. And, with to your point about the productivity, Sawyer was probably in a lot of cases going in against, getting a lot more snaps against Akron than he did against Michigan or, some of the, Penn State or someone like that. So that's going to skew those numbers a little bit. But as he continues to grow and as he continues to become more productive, it's possible he passes Jean-Baptiste, if, assuming these two guys are the Leo people, but let's just say they are, it's entirely possible he passes him this spring, this summer. Like that's a possibility. This is not a true freshman anymore. So he's someone who I think that they would like to see take a bigger role this year. Just a matter of, who wins the job coming out of camp. That's, this is a meritocracy. They don't do stuff just to make people feel good. This is a pure meritocracy, and whoever earns it during spring and summer and fall camp, then that'll be who your guy is. All right, next one from at Matthew Elkins. I know I'm late to the party, but do you think Jaxon Smith-Njigba stays in the slot or moves out like Garrett Wilson did?
I am on board with keeping him there. Don't change anything as it relates to Jaxon Smith-Njigba. I've said it a few times now, and yes, we would all love to see what Emeka Egbuka could do in the slot. Yes, that would be fun as well. However, we've seen what Jaxon Smith-Njigba can do in the slot. Why change it? And we've gotten glimpses of Emeka Egbuka out wide. That was fine as well. I just think you have a given. You have seen what CJ Stroud and Jaxon Smith-Njigba can do working together in this vein, and keep him there. You moved Garrett Wilson from there for this reason, to put him there. And he showed that it was a smart move. So why now move him again, unless it's somebody else that is trying to get on the field? But that somebody else can get on the field outside. There are voids. And so I don't think you need to move Smith-Njigba. I wouldn't do it. And if they do, boy, Emeka Egbuka he must be the best of all time then.
Yeah, I mean, this may be a little bit like the conversations that we tend to have on the offensive line, where you find your best 5 and then you move the guys around a little bit. They may find their best 3, and if their best 3 are Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka and Jaxon Smith-Njigba, then I mean, one of those guys has to go outside. You're not playing 2 slot guys, so they may just have to sort of sort it out from there. If if Julian Fleming's hurt and then those are your three guys, then you kind of figure it out from there. My assumption is Jaxon Smith-Njigba's NFL future is in the slot. So, he's probably, this is not necessarily going to be a Thayer Munford thing where it's like, well, you go outside and you show you're versatile and yada, yada, yada. I'm kind of with you. Like when you have something that is working as well as that is and stresses the defense in a spot where, you could impact 2 or 3 spots in the defense by having him in the slot. If you don't have a slot corner or a cover safety, whatever defenses call it, depending on the individual team, if you don't have a guy who can cover him, you got to dedicate a safety, linebacker, or shift your whole coverage around stopping this one guy in the slot. Because you've seen it, you've seen the results they're getting out of him. And like, that is not, if you give up 15 yards and 15 catches and 47 yards and 3 touchdowns to a team, like, you are probably not winning that game. And defensive coordinators know that. And so they've got to, they're going to have to figure that out. That creates so many other problems that him in the slot might make both of those outside wide receivers so much better, just because it's taking so many resources for the defense to focus on him that then the outside guys maybe have one-on-one coverage. So I think you kind of sort it out as the find your best 3 and then, shuffle them as you see fit to get those three on the field. But yeah, I'm with you. Keep him in the slot. Don't mess with a good thing. All right. Next one from @Ty725-27138. Does this revamped schedule help or hurt chances of Ohio State running the table? He thinks it benefits the new defensive scheme because there's no pass heavy offense until Michigan State. And I was going through the schedule because we did a show on this a week or 2 back. The Big Ten shuffled the schedule around, just nothing major, but small tweaks here and there. And I was kind of going through there. It was like, what passing offense on the schedule actually scares you? I mean, they might not play a team that is legitimately a pass first team until Maryland. I mean, there are not a lot of passing offenses on the team. Just to remind you, schedule is Notre Dame, Arkansas State, Toledo, Wisconsin, Rutgers, at Michigan State, home for Iowa, at Penn State, at Northwestern, home for Indiana, at Maryland, home for Michigan. So, I think the schedule benefits Ohio State more in that you've sort of spaced some of these games out where you've got, you've got all off season prepare for Notre Dame. Then you get a couple weeks with P5 or group of 5 teams. Then you got Wisconsin. Then you got Rutgers at home, which is, functionally a bye week at this point. Then you go to Michigan State. Then you have an off week. Then you have Iowa at home where, getting Iowa at home and not in Iowa City. Those are 2 very different things. Then you're at Penn State and at Northwestern. That's the only kind of scary part of the schedule is Iowa, at Penn State, at Northwestern. And Northwestern looks like they're probably not going to be great this year again. So, maybe that's not as much of a trap game as you might think. And then Indiana at home, at Maryland, and home for Michigan. I mean, that is a pretty friendly schedule for as many good teams as are on there. And frankly, I think there's an argument to be made that this is the toughest schedule in terms of like number of quality opponents that any, significant national championship contender plays. Like, look at Georgia's schedule for next year. And it's like, they might not play a ranked team the entire regular season, which is insane. Ohio State, you've got Notre Dame, you got Wisconsin, at Michigan State, home for Iowa, at Penn State, Michigan. I mean, like half the schedule is going to be teams that are probably top 20 teams, maybe top 10 teams. But even with that, it sets up pretty well.
Yeah, you look at the West Division teams they play arguably the 2 best teams, and then also that third one is a recent Big Ten championship team, a West Division championship team in Northwestern. But there's a lot of good teams. But going back to the original question about the passing, like there is very little passing on this schedule. And even at the point where they play Maryland November 19th, who knows what they're doing at that point. I'm sure they're probably still going to be throwing the ball around provided they have a healthy quarterback. But yeah, the defense in November that Ohio State will be fielding will be much different than the defense that they tried out there for Notre Dame. And I think I wonder how much fool's gold there will be. Like we were talking about last week with Michigan's defense. that they may be a top 10 defense because they play absolutely nobody for the bulk of the season in terms of offense. I think you might see some similar things with the passing game. Now, the running game for the Ohio State pass defense, the run defense for the Buckeyes, I think, you still play Wisconsin. So there is that, but yeah, there's not a lot of offense on this schedule. And I think that will make the Jim Knowles hire look really, really good for the regular season. And even if they make the Big Ten championship game, the Big Ten championship game as well. But the ultimate judge obviously will be the playoffs. But I think you're going to see some pretty good numbers from the Ohio State defense just based on the lack of offenses they're going to be facing.
And, there's a lot that's going to change between now and the season. Michigan State has done a lot of work in the transfer portal over the last year. So who knows what the Michigan State team is going to look like by the time September rolls around. You do have a lot of very physical teams. You've got a lot of teams that are kind of known for physical line play on this. Notre Dame, Wisconsin, Michigan State, Iowa. That's all, before October 22nd. Those are 4 teams that are known for like really physical line play. So I think we're going to have a decent sense for, will the defensive line hold up better than it did against Michigan at the end of the season? That's going to be a little bit of a challenge. Penn State is not known for good offensive line play these days, so that'll be what'll be interesting about that Penn State game is, Sean Clifford is back for a 6th season, right? 6th season, I think, and will they have gotten to the, is that the point where they're starting to work in Drew Aller a little bit, the way that Michigan sort of worked in JJ McCarthy a little more throughout the course of the season, as they sort of, and because I don't think Penn State's a championship team this year, so you may have a little bit of looking towards the future and you want to keep the true freshmen happy and look, we're trying, we're working you in more. You're a bigger part of the offense now. Please don't leave. Whatever you do, please don't leave me. So I think you may get a little bit of that, and that's the whiteout game, so you never know. But yeah, that November schedule at Northwestern, home for Indiana, at Maryland. You have seen Ohio State play close games against all 3 of those teams at various points in the past, but none of them individually are particularly scary. And, those are all teams that just, Jimmy's and Joe's matchups, like Ohio State should win all those games by 3-4 touchdowns. So I'm with you. This does seem like a pretty favorable schedule on the whole for Ohio State, given how difficult all those other teams are. All right. Last one from @DavidHooser1. So a lot of Ohio State fans watching the championship game talking about the size and athleticism of UGA and Bama and that Ohio State didn't stack up. Do you have the same feeling?
This is one of my pet peeves about Buckeye fans when they watch, or not even when they watch, when they see their own team struggling, they're like, Nick Saban doesn't do this. Georgia doesn't do this. And they don't actually know the facts on what Nick Saban does or doesn't do. And so many times being a guy on the internet, I've had to show people how they're wrong about stuff that they say about Nick Saban. And, Nick Saban has never hired a bad assistant coach. That's not true. Like there are plenty out there. And then I saw a popular Ohio State fan on Twitter tweet something about this, how Georgia's secondary just looks so huge and they're all like linebackers. And then you go and look at who is starting in Georgia's secondary, and it's there's their nickelback, their hybrid nickelback is like 6'2", 210. So he's like Josh Proctor size. Everybody else is like 6 foot 190, all typical secondary size. And the same deal with Alabama. And the way that Ohio State fans elevate now Georgia and also Alabama to this mythical status, it's I guess it's annoying to me because it's not necessarily based in reality. And you look at the size of the entire defense of either one. Yes, Jordan Davis is not a normal sized human. We agree with that. Georgia defensive nose tackle, but everybody else, they play 3-4, so they've got some bigger defensive linemen. But Will Anderson, their rush and outside linebacker / defensive end, is like 250 pounds. Like he's not. Ohio State doesn't have a 250-pound defensive end. Well, they do. His name is Jack Sawyer, and he doesn't really play. So and they've got 235-pound linebackers at Georgia and Alabama. Oh, like they do at Ohio State. and Georgia has a fast linebacker, but he's only like 225 pounds. Oh, like they do at Ohio State. They're all recruiting the same people. They're all signing the same types of people. Alabama and Nick Saban have done well enough in the world of reality that Ohio State fans should be able to operate in that same reality without elevating to fantasy to talk about how great Nick Saban is.
I think I agree with virtually everything you said there. I will say that I did look at that and just think that Georgia's linebacker scheme was just a little more aggressive. They're just, you look at their linebackers, they attack the ball better than Ohio State's do. They're in those holes or in those run fits just a little more aggressively. They feel like than Ohio State's are, but that's probably a function largely of they have veteran linebackers. And Ohio State had a guy who was literally playing running back 6 months ago. Like sometimes he's not going to know exactly what to do, like because he's learning the position. That's a thing that you can kind of see happen. So I think there's something to it, but also in addition to some of the stuff that you said, as a TV person, let me tell you, the camera angle at Ohio Stadium contributes to this a little bit because the camera deck at Ohio State is so high up that it's like you're shooting down from a mountain. You get a real steep angle. Everything's further away. If you're shooting from a lower angle, guys are going to look bigger. So stadiums with lower camera decks, the guys are going to look bigger. You're going to probably look a little bit faster. It's going to look, it is a more violent game when you were up close. As someone who was on the sideline, let me tell you, it is a more violent game when you were up close. As silly as it sounds, I think that plays into it a little bit because, you look at an Ohio State game at night on TV and you look at Alabama, Georgia game at night, LSU game at night. And like the lighting is a little different. The camera angle is a little different. And it looks like a different game. But then you see Ohio State on the field with Alabama. And when they don't have 12 people out from COVID and actually get to practice for the game, these are pretty comparable teams. So, I think there's some other stuff that goes into it that is stuff that people are definitely not thinking about, but which does play into it. To your point on Saban, yes, let us preface this conversation with Nick Saban is the greatest coach in the history of college football, period, full stop. Nick Saban's team was down 10-3 to a crappy garbage tire fire, flaming garbage scow of an Auburn team with like a minute left in the game. They're not perfect. Now, that's when you get more on Alabama fans online talking about the fact you need to fire Saban because the game has passed him by. It's like, there is no one on earth who deserves this less than you, so shut up. But they're not perfect. Every fan base hates their coordinators. Everyone was cursing Pete Golding and Bill O'Brien, and that's just kind of how it is. And then you look at Ohio, even the Ohio State teams that everyone remembers now as like these incredible teams. The 2014 Ohio State team. I've told the story in the podcast before, but I went to that game with my daughter who was 4 at the time. So it was a freezing cold day. There'd been freezing rain that morning. The roads were terrible. So I left in the middle of the game because she was 4 and it was 28 degrees or whatever it was. And as I'm walking out of the stadium, Indiana has the lead on Ohio State in the third quarter. And it was like, well, I bet this Ohio State team is not only going to come back, Jalen Marshall's going to score 4 touchdowns. Just wait, guys, just wait. And then they're going to beat Michigan, but JT Barrett's going to break his leg. But it's okay because then the guy who's never played much before with the one bad tweet, he's going to turn into an absolute like whirling death machine, and they're going to murder Wisconsin by 59 points, and then they're going to crush Alabama, and then they're going to annihilate Oregon in the national championship game. Just wait, just wait. It's going to happen. This team that's losing to Indiana right now and home in the third quarter. You're going to have ups and downs as a team. That's just every season. Like that's just how college football goes. So, I think there is a certain perspective lacking that, you ascribe perfection to every team other than your own. And it's like, no, everyone has their 10-3 to Auburn kind of moments.
Very well said, Tom. You should put that on like like above a doorway or on a watch or something, a paperweight T-shirt.
The second most inspiring SEC phrase that I saw today. behind an Ole Miss fan who made a recruiting graphic that said Oxford, a place that will get in your blood and stay forever. It's like, oh boy, that sounds like a very serious medical condition. Very, very bad.
Yeah, because once it's in there, like you can't get it out. And so, but it says that right on the label. It stays there forever. They should have known. Tom, anything else before we go?
Still need to talk about that warranty, but other than that, no, we can handle that off air. But yeah, other than that, no, I think we're good.
Good. Yes, off air definitely. I want to thank you all for tuning in. As always, we will have more shows this week. We will. I'll tell Tom what they're going to be, and he'll be fantastically fascinated by all of this. So, I want to thank you all for joining us. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and we will talk to you guys later.